As a society, everybody just kind of goes home and sits in their house. Everybody's so busy.
We have lost the connection that was in the neighborhoods back when I was growing up.
We don't get out and talk to each other as much as previous generations used to do. I think that this initiative is so important because it brings people together in a way that maybe might not naturally happen anymore.
Why is it that a good neighbor is someone that you never hear from, or they keep themselves and you keep to yourself? Abundant Communities is challenging that, and it's a good thing.
Abundant Community Edmonton is a framework that enables neighbors to connect with one another. So this is a way of just giving permission to have somebody on the block to introduce themselves, maybe introduce neighbors to one another.
I think the block connector role is very important. They organize events, they meet people, and they give that opportunity for neighbors to come together and making sure that they know there's someone to help them if they need it.
Abundant communities is really important in any community, but it's especially important in high density. In high density, you're surrounded by so many people, you run into them every day, you're living one on top of the other. It's my job to identify blocks, or in high density's case, buildings, and find people who are willing to act as building connectors. So people who are willing to go and knock on their neighbors' doors and have a chat about their interests, their vision for the neighborhood, and hopefully act as kind of the point person in the building.
Being me from South America, I'm usually more social than other people, so for me getting to know my neighbors is important. You never know when you have a new family coming that doesn't have any natural supports, or because you have seniors that they still live by themselves. The creation of those natural supports through the connections that the Abundant Community gives to the community is the most important in society.
My yard sharing started because I had heard so much about people wanting community gardens.
So we had a plot in her backyard that she hadn't been able to garden for quite a number of years. I eagerly raised my hand and said, I'd love to do it.
It's been a bigger success than I had expected. We got along really, really well, and they work hard to do it. And I have benefited as well as they have.
The hour or two that I spent a week weeding or just maintaining the garden meant the world to both of us for the summer, because we had fresh produce all summer long.
In the old days, when you were out in your yard and growing the garden, you talked to the neighbors over the fence, they walked down the lane, they checked out what you were growing, and it helped to build friendships and for people to know each other and trust each other. I wouldn't have met Sheila and Andy had I not gone and connected with Bubba with this garden, and they live 3 blocks away, and it's wonderful.
Hey, Heather. Good, how are you? I always think of Macaulay as a complex neighborhood. When people ask what part of the city I'm from, and I say Macaulay, it usually turns into a whole conversation. To me, block connecting is just taking day-to-day moments to connect with people one-on-one, and just literally connecting with them. I had set up a table before with like hot chocolate and tea and stuff. I will take that opportunity to go off and introduce myself. Like for my neighbor a couple doors down, he's from the outside. It's one of these houses that people have assumptions about, that it doesn't look extremely welcoming, it's an old fence and it seems a bit run down. But then we walked up and knocked on the door a little bit hesitantly, not knowing who was going to come out, and we meet like the nicest guy. You know, Abundant Communities gives this opportunity to get to know your neighborhood at a very local level. I don't know, I think a part of Abundant Communities is taking those risks too, and being confident to know that you're in a safe community and it's okay to go and talk to your neighbors, and it'll be fine.
I realized that I knew most of my neighbors on this street, except there was one house on the corner that I hadn't met the people who lived there, and knew they were a senior couple. The only interaction I'd ever had with them was to see them slow down their car and roll down the window to talk to our children when our children were playing on the street in front of their house. So I just made the assumption, without doing any other research, that they just didn't like to see our kids on the street. Several weeks ago, we actually had a community potluck. One of my neighbors said to me, "You should come and meet Malcolm and Ava." And it was this senior couple that lives down the road on the corner. Malcolm sat me down and he said, "I love your kids." He said, "We only have one grandchild and she lives far away, and so it makes us feel like the neighborhood grandparents when we watch your kids out the window." And I was starting to feel a little emotional because here I was all along thinking they didn't like my kids.
Hey, they're always out in the park playing, and totally reminds me of my childhood growing up when kids were just always out. We were playing with each other all day long and out in the street, and these kids are doing the same thing, so it just warms the heart.
Malcolm said there is one thing that makes me feel very nervous, is that one of the kids in particular rides his bike through the yield sign all the time. So I stop my car and I say, "Not everybody drives as carefully as me, so please be careful when you're going through the yield sign," which is a really wonderful neighborly thing to do because he's actually looking out for our kids' safety. I'm not sure that I ever would have met them if it hadn't have been for that potluck. And that potluck was an initiative of Abundant Community Edmonton, and I can see that it's made a difference here in Laurier because it feels different than any neighborhood I've ever lived in. It feels very connected and very safe.